As you all know, I am a big film nerd. I have reviewed films in the past and even created my own original work, as that's what I want to be in the future, a film director. Now, when it comes to media, you often hear people say that you know something's good when you get inspired by it. And that is also what inspired me to create this video. This is the top 10 movies and shows that inspired me to do what I do. So let's get started. AKIRA came out in 1988 and I watched the movie in October of 2020. It has been labelled as the Eastern animation landmark and is a whole reason for why anime came to the USA in the first place and other countries. If AKIRA never existed, then we, the Western people, wouldn't even hear about Pokemon, Dragon Ball or Yu-Gi-Oh! In the first place. AKIRA was the film that got me more interested in watching foreign media and cyberpunk movies. Hell, it even got me learning my own language. I think I've said this before in a previous video, but if not, I'd just like to let you know that Night at the Museum was the very first film I ever watched. Back then, this was pretty much the only thing I ever watched, over and over again, until I eventually became familiar with all the dialogue, all the scenes, everything. It's also the reason why Ben Stiller's my number one actor, because when I think of nostalgic things from the 2000s, he's one of the first things that pops up. The film is a reason why I have an imagination for, history and fictional stuff, and it even got me into, going into museums, got me interested in going there and, seeking out new stuff. Hell, I even went to the actual National History Museum in New York back in 2017. Now, I wasn't a fan of horror at the time, but Child's Play was the film that got me into the genre. I remember being obsessed with this film back when I was 8 years old, and it was also around the time when I started finding out what plasticine was, and therefore creating my own little characters and have Chucky kill them all, because, it's the type of thing an 8-year-old would be interested in. Now, you can make the argument and say that raises alarm bells. I can totally understand that, but when you're 8 years old, you can either see it as proper terrifying or just good old-fashioned fun. With that out of the way, Chucky did play a big role on my part, as it got me more interested. It made me find more horror films to watch and even inspired me to create my own. Now, for those of you who are not OGs on my channel, I'd just like to let you know that Monster Quest is my favourite TV show of all time. I was originally going to plan to do a video of this, but to do with my age and my job and the other stuff that I do, there's just no time for it. The show is about these scientists that get phone calls throughout the world about people reportedly seeing things like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, so they go and investigate them. Child's Play got me into the horror genre. Monster Quest got me into the cryptozoology genre. The show inspired me to watch more cryptid documentaries like Lost Tapes and Animal X. Now, I know a lot of kids my age do not watch documentaries, but it also got me into watching documentaries as well. Do you ever have that one show that you're just madly obsessed with? Well, Smile and Friends was one for me. I remember back in the early days of 2022, the only thing I ever really watched was Smile and Friends. I don't remember ever being so hooked on a show in all my life. I literally could not get enough of this show. From the humour to everything, oh my god, it was just pure gold. And the people behind the show, Zach Hadel and Michael Cusack, oh bloody hell, these guys are geniuses when it comes to sense of humour. Now, I remember back last year, me and my mate were watching the Spamtopia episode. He'd never seen it before, right? And he thought it was the funniest thing. He nearly died of laughter, and I was just sitting there crying my eyes out. Now, if there's one thing that Smile and Friends has done to me that has changed my life, it is give me a good sense of humour. There is no denying that the very first movie I ever watched at cinemas inspired me. This film is the definition of good old childhood nostalgia. It is the reason why I'm interested in monster movies. It's the reason why I'm interested in army movies. All of it. Now, I know this movie isn't for everyone, right? But I can't think of a more soothing DreamWorks film than this one. I'd watch this film over any other DreamWorks movie. Hell, I remember getting a DVD of this movie from Blockbusters before the company went bankrupt in 2010. I didn't go to see this film at cinemas, but I did see it advertised on the television and I was immediately hooked. It wasn't just the film itself or its humour, it was mostly the designs of the characters. Usually when you see animated movies like DreamWorks, they Pixar, they always look like dead realistic, but in this Astro Boy movie, they look more like anime characters, which, yeah, it is based off an anime. Like, it has got that very cutesy look that a typical anime would have, and I love that art style. There was something about it that just made it look dead outstanding, dead original, dead appealing, and that is if the soundtrack doesn't do it alone. The soundtrack is unbelievably memorable. You can just listen to it on repeat and it still won't get old. And it doesn't surprise you that the soundtrack was created by John Ottman, the same guy who also did the soundtrack to the X-Men. With Monsters vs Aliens being the film that got me into monster movies, this Astro Boy film also got me into robots and listening to soundtracks. I've talked about this one quite a few times on my channel, as it is my favourite movie of all time. I remember seeing the first trailer of this film back in 2012 and instantly fell in love with it, and when I watched it in the cinemas, I ended up loving it even more. Back then, I didn't really have any potential of becoming a film director. I mean, yeah, I did love most films, but back then I wanted to become something like a policeman or a fireman. But when I watched this film, it ended up encouraging me to become what I really am today. So, if it wasn't for Jack the Giant Slayer, I wouldn't have become a director, let alone a YouTuber in the first place. And despite the mixed reviews that the film suffers from, I still have it to thank. For those of you who are not familiar with Mr. Maker, it's basically the British version of Art Attack. I remember taking a deep interest in all the stuff that this guy did, and even tried mimicking it in school. And that's how I became so creative in the first place. If it wasn't for Mr. Maker, I probably wouldn't be as good with my stop motion characters as I am now. This doesn't just cater towards kids, but it also caters towards adults as well. The humour still holds up to this day, and there are times where I just sit down, relax, and put an episode on to gain good old nostalgia. So for those of you who are watching this video who want to get good at your creativity, I highly recommend checking out Mr. Maker. And if you're a parent who has a child who is creative, then I would recommend this to them as well. Now, before we get to number one, I do have these two honourable mentions. Now, there has been many things that have inspired me to do horror films, and Dorohedoro made me more creative when it came to it. I love the character designs in this show, I love its music, and it's really underrated, but it has become my favourite anime of all time, and if you guys haven't seen Dorohedoro, I recommend checking it out. Angelo rules, another show that has inspired me to do something, and believe it or not, this was the show that actually encouraged me to get a YouTube channel. Basically, a long story short, I went to Austria back in 2018, and that's when I first discovered Netflix, because back in the day, I only used to watch random clips on YouTube. I was actually thinking of getting a YouTube channel way before I went to Austria so I can review obscure media and a few other things. But then when I just found out all the stuff on Netflix and seen all the obscure stuff, and Angelo Rules happened to be on there, gave it a watch and I thought it was good, and that is what encouraged me to get a YouTube channel. And finally, number one, PINGU. I can't talk about inspiration without mentioning PINGU. It is literally the definition of that. The thing that got me inspired to do the things that I do. Actual comedy, clay motion, creativity, you name it. It's also not like any other kids show I remember growing up with, as most of the other kids shows looked the same and acted the same, but PINGU was just something entirely different. Like, the humour still ages better over time with all the memes you see on YouTube. And even though there ain't no merchandise of the show, I do remember getting this toy set from Butlins back in, 2007. Now, don't get me wrong, there still is merchandise out there, but it is incredibly rare. Like, you can only find them on, like, Amazon and eBay. I also remember a long time ago I watched the behind the scenes of how PINGU was made, and they were using plasticine and clay models for it. And Udma Goodman, the creator of the show, demonstrated on how to professionally do it. And even though I was only young, I did use it like Lego pieces and bought my own clay models, built them myself. And the more I done it, the more I learnt off him, the more better I got. So I have Udma Goodman to thank. And that is it for the video. Please leave a like and a comment if you have any inspiration on your mind. And as always, I am Star Invader, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.